My brother stole from my husband's company twice after I got him hired as a personal favor, but when he got fired my parents blamed us and started harassing us for months, then tried to use my baby as leverage to force me to apologize to them. We live in a decent neighborhood where my husband Cedric, 35M, works as a regional manager for a supply distribution company. I, 32F, work as an accountant at a local firm. We don't have kids yet, but we've been talking about it lately. My brother Darren is 25M. Growing up, he was always the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. When I brought home straight A's, they'd pat me on the head and move on. When Darren passed a test he'd barely studied for, they'd throw a celebration dinner. It was always like that. I learned early on to just accept it and focus on my own life. Darren went to college on our parents' dime. They paid his full tuition at a state school about 3 hours away. He dropped out after 2 years. The official story was that college wasn't for him and he needed to find his own path. The real story, which I pieced together from scattered phone calls and arguments I overheard, was that he stopped going to classes halfway through his sophomore year and only told our parents when the school sent a letter saying he was being dismissed for poor academic standing. Our parents never made him pay back a cent of that tuition money. After college, Darren moved back home. He got a job at a local retail store stocking shelves. He quit after 4 months because his manager was apparently too demanding. Then he worked at a call center for 6 months before he stopped showing up. After that, he did some gig delivery work for a while, but that fizzled out too. For the past 3 years, he's been unemployed. He lives in our childhood bedroom rent-free. Our parents make excuses about how the job market is tough and how Darren is just trying to figure things out. Last year in March, my parents came over for dinner at our house. It was supposed to be a casual Sunday meal. My mom brought her lasagna and my dad brought wine. We ate and chatted about normal things for a while. Then, as Cedric was clearing plates, my mom started in on me about Darren. She said he was getting depressed sitting at home all day. She said he needed structure and purpose. She said it would mean the world to them if Cedric could help Darren get a job at his company. My dad chimed in about how Darren just needed someone to give him a real opportunity. They laid it on thick about family responsibility and how I was doing so well in life while Darren was struggling. I didn't want to do it. I knew Darren's track record. But my parents looked worn down. My mom had new lines around her eyes and my dad's hair had gone mostly gray in the past few years. They weren't asking me to give Darren money or let him move in with us. They were just asking for a job referral. I told them I'd talk to Cedric. Cedric wasn't enthusiastic when I brought it up that night after my parents left. He pointed out that hiring someone as a favor rarely works out well. He reminded me about Darren's employment history. But I pressed him on it. I told him it was important to my parents and that maybe Darren would actually step up if someone in the family gave him a chance. Cedric finally agreed, but he made it clear he was only doing it because I asked. He said Darren would have to interview properly and meet the basic requirements like anyone else. Darren interviewed in April. Cedric set him up with the standard HR process. Darren apparently did fine in the interview, nothing spectacular but nothing terrible either. Cedric's company needed sales representatives to handle client accounts and manage inventory distribution. It wasn't a complicated job, but it required someone reliable and honest. Cedric hired Darren with the understanding that he'd be on a 90-day probationary period like all new hires. Darren started work in May of last year. For the first few weeks, my parents called me constantly to thank me. They said Darren was doing great and seemed really motivated. My mom sent me a photo of Darren in business casual clothes on his first day. I wanted to believe this was his turning point. I wanted to believe I'd done the right thing. Cedric didn't talk much about Darren's performance at work. He kept professional boundaries, which I appreciated. When I asked how Darren was doing, Cedric would say things were fine or that Darren was learning the ropes. I took that as a good sign. In July, something happened that Cedric didn't tell me about until much later. There were discrepancies in the inventory counts. Some smaller items, electronics accessories mostly, were showing up as missing. Cedric reviewed the security logs and warehouse access records. He tracked the pattern to Darren's shifts. He pulled Darren aside privately and confronted him about it. Darren broke down and admitted he'd taken some items. He said he needed extra money and thought no one would notice a few missing accessories. Cedric told him this was theft and he could call the police. Darren begged him not to. He said he'd never do it again and that he'd pay back everything. Cedric made a decision not to fire him and not to tell me. He said later that he didn't want to humiliate me or cause family drama over what he hoped was a one-time stupid mistake. He warned Darren that if anything else went missing, he'd be terminated immediately and charges would be filed. I found all of this out 2 weeks ago. In late November, Cedric's company did another inventory audit. More items were missing. This time it was bigger ticket stuff. Cedric reviewed everything again and it pointed to Darren. He called Darren into his office with an HR representative present. Darren denied it at first, but when Cedric showed him the access logs and timestamps, Darren admitted it. Cedric fired him on the spot. When Cedric came home that night, he told me everything. He explained about the first incident in July and about what had just happened. I sat at our kitchen table while he talked. My hands were shaking. I asked him why he didn't tell me the first time. He said he'd hoped Darren would actually learn from the warning. He said he'd given Darren a second chance precisely because he was my brother and he didn't want to blow up my family relationships over one mistake. I called Darren that same night. I used Cedric's phone because I figured Darren might not pick up if he saw my number. He answered. I asked him if what Cedric said was true. Darren started making excuses about how the job didn't pay enough and how he had debts to cover. I asked him what debts a person who lives rent-free with his parents could possibly have. He got defensive and said I wouldn't understand. He said Cedric was looking for a reason to fire him because Cedric never really wanted him there in the first place. I told him he stole from the company. I told him Cedric gave him a chance after the first time and he threw it away. I told him not to contact me again. Then I hung up. My parents called me the next morning. Darren had apparently gone home and told them his version where Cedric fired him unfairly over a misunderstanding. They wanted me to talk to Cedric about giving Darren another chance. I told them what actually happened. I told them about both incidents of theft. My mom started crying on the phone. My dad said there must be some mistake. I said there was no mistake and that Darren admitted to everything. Over the next week, my parents called and texted constantly. They said family should stick together. They said Cedric was family too now so he should forgive Darren. They said everyone makes mistakes and Darren deserved another chance. I pointed out that Darren already got a second chance after stealing the first time. They didn't seem to hear that part. They just kept cycling back to how I was abandoning my brother and how cruel I was being. My mom sent me long text messages about how she didn't raise me to turn my back on family. My dad sent shorter ones calling me selfish. Darren texted me from a new number asking me to convince Cedric to give him his job back. When I didn't respond, he sent another text saying I was just like Cedric now, cold and unforgiving. I blocked Darren's new number. I told my parents one final time to stop contacting me about this. I said Darren was an adult who made his own choices and faced his own consequences. I said their constant enabling was exactly why he kept making these choices. My mom accused me of being brainwashed by Cedric. That was the last straw. I blocked both of my parents' numbers. Cedric had a business trip scheduled for the first week of December. He'd be gone for 5 days visiting distribution centers in California. The day after he left, someone knocked on our door around noon. I looked through the peephole and saw my parents standing there. I opened the door. My mom's eyes were already red. She pushed past me into the house without asking. My dad followed her. I asked them what they were doing here. My mom said they needed to talk sense into me. She said she couldn't believe I'd blocked my own parents over something so trivial. I told them it wasn't trivial. I told them Darren stole from Cedric's company twice and got fired for it. My mom started crying harder. She said Darren was going through a difficult time and needed support. She said I was choosing Cedric over my real family. I said Cedric was my real family. I said he was my husband and my partner and he'd done nothing wrong. My dad got loud then. He said I'd always thought I was better than everyone else. He said I'd moved away and forgotten where I came from. He said blood was thicker than water and I was betraying my blood. I told him I hadn't forgotten anything. I told him they'd spent my whole life making excuses for Darren and that's why he was 25 years old with no job and no prospects. My mom stopped crying. Her face changed. She said she didn't raise a daughter who talked to her parents like this. She said I'd become someone she didn't recognize. I told her maybe she should have paid more attention to raising Darren instead of just bailing him out every time he messed up. My dad called me a spoiled brat. He said Cedric had clearly turned me against my own family. He used some language I won't repeat here. I opened the front door and told them to leave. My mom said I'd regret this. My dad said I was dead to them if I didn't apologize and fix things with Darren. I said I had nothing to apologize for. They left. My mom was yelling something as she walked down the driveway but I closed the door and locked it. Cedric came home 3 days later. I told him what happened. He pulled me into a hug and said he was sorry I had to deal with that alone. Then he showed me an email Darren had sent to his work account. It was long and rambling. Darren accused Cedric of manipulating me and isolating me from my family. He said Cedric had always been jealous of the close bond I had with my parents and this was his way of destroying it. He said he was going to report Cedric to corporate HR for wrongful termination. Cedric forwarded it to his actual HR department so they had it on record. 2 days after that, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. It was from my mom. The email said that since I'd chosen to abandon my family, they were choosing to move forward as if they'd never had a daughter. The email said they were done trying to reach someone who clearly didn't want to be reached. It ended with a line about how they hoped I was happy with my decision. I didn't respond. Neither did Cedric. We went about our lives. Then my parents started calling Cedric's parents. They told Cedric's mom and dad their version of events where Cedric had gotten Darren fired over nothing and I'd sided with Cedric against my own flesh and blood. Cedric's parents called us to ask what was actually going on. We explained everything. They were supportive and told us to ignore my parents' drama. The holidays came and went. We spent Christmas with Cedric's family. His parents asked if we'd heard from mine. We said no. They didn't push it. On New Year's Eve, Cedric's sister mentioned that she'd seen my mom commenting on Facebook posts from extended family members, talking about how some children forget their parents once they get married. I'd already unfollowed my parents on social media months ago, so I hadn't seen any of it. In January, I started feeling sick in the mornings. I took a test. It was positive. Cedric and I had been trying casually but weren't expecting it to happen so soon. We sat in our bathroom looking at the test together. Neither of us said anything for a minute. Then Cedric asked if I was going to tell my parents. I said no. He asked if I was sure. I said I was sure. He didn't argue. Is blocking my parents and refusing to fix things with my brother really the wrong thing to do here? Everyone keeps saying family is important, but nobody seems to care that Darren stole from my husband's company twice and my parents defended him anyway. Update 1. Several people asked me to update, so here it is. Things got messier before they got better, if you can even call what I have now better. After I posted originally, Cedric and I decided to just keep the pregnancy to ourselves for a while. I was about 8 weeks along then. We told Cedric's parents around week 12 because his mom kept asking why I wasn't drinking wine at Sunday dinners anymore. She cried when we told her. Cedric's dad shook Cedric's hand and hugged me. It felt good to share it with people who were actually happy for us. The problem was that Cedric's parents have a big extended family and word spreads fast. By early February, most of Cedric's relatives knew. Some of them are Facebook friends with some of my relatives. My Aunt Letty, my dad's sister, sent me a message congratulating me on the baby. I thanked her and asked her to please not mention it to my parents. She said she wouldn't, but she also said she thought I should reconsider cutting them off during such an important time. I didn't respond to that part. 2 weeks later, my cousin posted a family photo on Instagram from some gathering I wasn't invited to. My Aunt Letty was in the photo. So were my parents. The caption mentioned welcoming new additions to the family soon. Someone commented asking who was pregnant. My Aunt Letty replied with my name and congratulations. My parents definitely saw it because my mom likes all of my Aunt Letty's posts. The next day I got an email from my mom. The subject line said congratulations. The email itself was 3 paragraphs about how they'd heard the news and were excited to be grandparents. It said this was a blessing and an opportunity for everyone to move past the unfortunate situation with Darren. It said they wanted to meet for coffee to discuss how we could all move forward together now that there was a baby coming. I showed Cedric the email. He read it twice. Then he asked what I wanted to do. I said I wanted to respond, but I needed to think about what to say. He said whatever I decided, he'd support it. I spent 2 days writing and rewriting a response. I finally sent something back explaining that while I appreciated the congratulations, moving forward required acknowledging what actually happened. I said Darren stole from Cedric's company twice and got fired for legitimate reasons. I said they'd spent months harassing us and calling us names instead of holding Darren accountable. I said they'd told Cedric's parents lies about what happened. I said if they wanted any relationship with me or my child, they needed to apologize to both me and Cedric for everything they'd said and done since Darren got fired. My mom responded within an hour. The email wasn't congratulatory anymore. She said I was being unreasonable and holding grudges. She said they'd already reached out and tried to make peace by acknowledging the baby. She said that should be enough. She said any good daughter would be grateful her parents were willing to let bygones be bygones. She said I was using the baby as a weapon to force them to turn against Darren. My dad sent a separate email. His was shorter. He said they'd done nothing wrong and had nothing to apologize for. He said Cedric had overreacted by firing Darren and I'd overreacted by cutting off my family. He said if anyone should be apologizing, it was me and Cedric. He said they were willing to forgive us and be involved grandparents if we admitted we'd handled everything wrong. I didn't respond to either email. Cedric said we should just ignore them and focus on the pregnancy. I agreed. But the emails kept coming. My mom sent one every few days through February and into March. They ranged from guilt trips about how I was denying them the chance to be grandparents to angry rants about how I turned into someone they didn't know. My dad's emails were less frequent but harsher. He called me ungrateful. He said I'd wasted the opportunities they'd given me by getting a good education just to end up as someone who abandoned family. In late March, my mom sent an email with the subject line final offer. She said they'd been more than patient. She said they'd tried everything to reach me. She said if I didn't agree to sit down and talk with them by the end of the week, they'd consider it my final answer and would stop trying. The email said they'd accept that I'd chosen Cedric over them and they'd move on with their lives. I didn't respond. The deadline passed. I got one more email from my mom. It was 2 sentences. It said they'd given me every chance to do the right thing and I'd refused. It said they were done and I shouldn't expect to hear from them again. That was 6 weeks ago now. I haven't heard anything since. I'm 28 weeks pregnant now. We found out we're having a girl. Cedric's parents are over the moon. His mom has already started buying baby clothes. His dad is building a crib in their garage as a gift. My Aunt Letty texted me last week. She said my mom has been posting sad quotes on Facebook about ungrateful children. She said my dad hasn't been showing up to family events. She asked if I was really going to let this continue through the birth of my baby. She said babies have a way of bringing families back together. I told her I appreciated her concern, but this wasn't something a baby could fix. She said I was being stubborn. I haven't responded since. Cedric's been great through all of this. He hasn't said I told you so, even though he had reservations about hiring Darren from the start. He just makes sure I'm eating enough and getting rest. His parents invited us over for dinner twice a week now. His mom says it's because she wants to make sure I'm not overdoing it at work, but I think it's also her way of making sure I don't feel alone. I went to a prenatal appointment yesterday. Everything looks good with the baby. The doctor asked if my mom was going to be at the birth. I said no. She asked if there was anyone else I wanted in the room besides Cedric. I said no. She dropped it after that, but I could tell she thought it was strange. I've been thinking about whether I made the right choice. Not about Darren, because that part is clear. He stole and got caught and faced consequences. But about my parents. Part of me wonders if I should have handled it differently. Then I remember the email where my mom said I was using the baby as a weapon. I remember my dad saying we should apologize to them. I remember them showing up at my house and yelling at me. I remember all the texts calling me selfish and cold. None of that sounds like people who should be around my daughter. Cedric asked me last night if I thought my parents would try to show up at the hospital when I go into labor. I hadn't thought about that. I told him I didn't know. He said we could register as private when we check in so the hospital won't confirm we're there if anyone calls. I said that seemed like a good idea. Then we sat in silence for a while. He held my hand. I didn't cry, but I wanted to. That's where things are now. No contact with my parents or Darren. A baby girl coming in about 12 weeks. Cedric's family being wonderful. My extended family sending occasional messages suggesting I'm the problem. I'm still not sure I made the right choice, but I'm sure I made the only choice I could live with. Update 2: the baby arrived 3 weeks ago. Her name is Nancy. She was born at 7 pounds even and came out screaming. Cedric cried when they put her on my chest. His parents came to the hospital the same day and his mom cried too. We spent 2 days in the hospital and then came home. Everything went smoothly. The day before my due date, Cedric sent a text to my parents' old numbers before I blocked them. He didn't ask me first. He just did it. The text said I was going into labor soon and if they wanted to know when the baby arrived, they could reach out respectfully. He told me about it after he sent it. I asked him why he did it. He said he didn't want me to wonder later if we should have told them. He said at least this way I'd know we tried one more time. Neither of my parents responded to Cedric's text. No call, no text back, nothing. My brother didn't reach out either. We went to the hospital the next afternoon when my contractions were 5 minutes apart. I labored for 14 hours. Nancy was born at 6 in the morning. Cedric called his parents right away. They came within 2 hours. Nobody from my side showed up or called. We'd been home with Nancy for about a week when I got another email. This one was from my dad's email address, but it was written by my mom. I could tell from the tone. The email said they'd heard through family that I'd had the baby. It congratulated us briefly. Then it said they'd given the situation a lot of thought over the past months. It said they realized they may have been too harsh in some of their previous communications. It said they'd like to move forward and meet their granddaughter. I read the email 3 times. Cedric read it over my shoulder while I was holding Nancy. He asked what I thought. I said it wasn't an apology. He agreed. I asked him what he thought I should do. He said it was my family and my decision, but that email didn't sound like people who'd actually changed their minds about anything. I waited 2 days before responding. I wrote that I'd received their email. I said I was glad they'd thought about the situation. I said I was still waiting for an actual apology for the months of harassment, the lies they told Cedric's parents, the names they called us, and the way they showed up at our house and berated me. I said moving forward wasn't possible without acknowledging what they'd done wrong. My dad responded this time, from his own email. He said they hadn't done anything that required an apology. He said they'd reacted like any parents would when their son lost his job. He said everything that happened was a natural consequence of Cedric's decision to fire Darren. He said they'd been hurt by my choice to cut them off, but they were willing to look past it for the sake of their grandchild. He said asking them to apologize was asking them to pretend Darren deserved to be fired when he didn't. I showed that email to Cedric. He put Nancy in her bassinet and then read it on my phone. His jaw clenched when he got to the part about Darren not deserving to be fired. He handed my phone back to me and asked if I wanted him to respond. I said no. I said I'd handle it. I sent one more email. I kept it short. I said Darren stole from the company twice and admitted to it both times. I said those were facts, not opinions. I said I wouldn't debate them anymore. I said if they couldn't acknowledge basic reality and apologize for their behavior, then we had nothing more to discuss. I said they were welcome to meet Nancy when they were ready to take accountability. Until then, we were done. My mom sent a reply within minutes. She said I was being cruel and vindictive. She said they'd lowered themselves to reach out despite everything I'd done and I'd thrown it back in their faces. She said they wouldn't beg me for access to their grandchild. She said if this was how I wanted it, then fine. She said they'd tried and that was all they could do. She said I'd have to live with my choices. That was 2 weeks ago. I haven't heard anything since. Cedric's mom comes over almost every day now to help with Nancy. She brings food and holds the baby while I shower. Cedric's dad installed a camera doorbell for us last weekend without being asked. When I thanked him, he just said he wanted to make sure we felt safe. My Aunt Letty called me 5 days ago. She said my mom had posted on Facebook about being denied access to her grandchild by a cruel daughter. She said several family members had commented with support for my mom. She said my cousin had shared the post with a caption about how sad it was when children forgot the sacrifices their parents made. My Aunt Letty said she wasn't taking sides, but she wanted me to know what was being said. I asked her what my mom's post said exactly. She read it to me over the phone. It talked about a daughter who cut off contact over a simple workplace disagreement. It said the daughter refused to let her parents meet their grandchild unless they apologized for trying to help their son. It said some children grow up to become strangers. It didn't mention that Darren stole anything. It didn't mention the months of harassment. It just painted them as victims of an ungrateful daughter. I thanked my Aunt Letty for telling me. She asked if I was going to respond or correct the story publicly. I said no. She asked why not. I said because anyone who actually knows me and Cedric knows the truth. I said everyone else could believe whatever they want. She said that seemed unwise, but it was my choice. Cedric and I talked about it that night after Nancy went down to sleep. He asked if I wanted him to post something explaining what really happened. I said no. I said it wouldn't change anything. The people who believed my parents wouldn't believe us anyway. The people who know us would already know the truth. Making it a public fight would just give my parents more ammunition to paint themselves as victims. Yesterday, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but I was waiting for a call back from Nancy's pediatrician's office about a scheduling question. I picked up. It was Darren. He didn't identify himself at first. He just started talking. He said he knew I'd had a baby. He said he wanted to meet his niece. He said he'd made mistakes but he'd learned from them. He said he had a new job now at a warehouse and he was doing better. He said families should forgive each other. I asked him if he was calling to apologize for stealing from Cedric's company. He went quiet for a second. Then he said that whole situation was complicated and he didn't think I understood his side of it. I asked him what there was to understand about taking things that didn't belong to him. He said I was being judgmental. He said Cedric could have handled it differently. He said Cedric wanted him gone from the start and used the inventory stuff as an excuse. I hung up. He called back twice. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. It was long. He said I was being unreasonable. He said everyone makes mistakes and he'd paid for his. He said keeping him away from his niece was cruel. He said our parents were devastated and it was my fault. He said I should think about what kind of example I was setting for my daughter by holding grudges. I blocked the number. I told Cedric about it. He asked if Darren had threatened me or said anything concerning. I said no, just the usual victim playing. Cedric said we should keep a record of any contact attempts just in case. I said okay. Nancy is 3 weeks old now. She sleeps in 2-hour stretches at night. I'm exhausted but she's perfect. Cedric's been taking the early morning shift on weekends so I can sleep in. His parents take her for a few hours twice a week so we can both nap. It's not the family situation I imagined when I was pregnant, but it's what we have. I don't know if my parents will ever actually apologize. I don't know if they even think they did anything wrong. I don't know if Darren really has a new job or if that was just another story. I don't know what they're telling people about why they haven't met Nancy. I do know I'm not reaching out again. The door is open if they want to walk through it with a real apology and acknowledgement of reality. Until then, Nancy has 2 parents and 2 grandparents and 2 great-parents-in-law who love her. That's enough. Update 3: Nancy is 8 months old now. She's crawling and pulling herself up on furniture. She has Cedric's eyes and apparently my stubborn streak according to Cedric's mom. We're doing fine. This will probably be my last update because there's not much left to say. 3 months ago, I got an email from my parents. Both of them were CC'd. The email said they'd discussed things extensively as a family, including Darren. It said they'd decided they were willing to forgive me and Cedric for everything that happened. It said they wanted to arrange a time to visit and meet Nancy. It said they thought Sunday afternoons worked best for them. It said to let them know which Sunday we preferred in the next month. I read that email sitting in Nancy's nursery while she napped. Cedric was at work. I read it 4 times trying to find any sentence that sounded like an actual apology or acknowledgement. There wasn't one. The whole email was framed as them doing us a favor by forgiving us and offering to visit. I forwarded it to Cedric. He called me from his office during his lunch break. He asked how I wanted to handle it. I said I wanted to ignore it. He said okay. So that's what we did. We didn't respond. 2 weeks later, my mom sent a follow-up email asking if I'd gotten the previous one. She said she knew I was busy with a baby but this was important. She said they'd cleared their schedules to make time for visits and they needed to know which Sundays worked. She said they were being very patient but they'd appreciate a response. I still didn't respond. Cedric asked if I felt okay about that choice. I said I did. He said then that's what we'd do. A month after the first email, my dad sent one. His tone was different. He said they'd made a generous offer and I'd ignored it. He said they were done playing games. He said if I wanted them in my life and Nancy's life, I needed to respond with a date and time for them to visit. He said this was their final attempt to extend an olive branch. He said after this, they were moving on completely. I let that one sit in my inbox for 3 days. Then I responded. I kept it to 2 paragraphs. I said their emails showed they still didn't understand why we weren't in contact. I said they'd never apologized for months of harassment, name-calling, lying to Cedric's family, or defending Darren's theft. I said I wasn't interested in them forgiving me when they were the ones who needed to apologize. I said when they were ready to take accountability for their actions, we could talk. Until then, there was nothing to discuss. My dad responded in all capital letters. The email called me an ungrateful brat. It said they'd tried everything and I'd spit in their faces every time. It said I'd turned into someone they were ashamed to call their daughter. It said they were done trying. It said I'd made my choice and they were making theirs. It said they wanted nothing more to do with me or my husband or my child. It said we were all dead to them now. That was 10 weeks ago. I haven't heard anything since. My Aunt Letty stopped texting me about it. I think she finally realized I wasn't going to change my mind. Some of Cedric's relatives who are connected to my family on social media told us my mom deleted her Facebook account. We don't know if that's true or if she just blocked everyone connected to us. Last month was Nancy's first Thanksgiving. We spent it at Cedric's parents' house with his whole extended family. There were about 20 people there. Nancy sat in a high chair and smashed sweet potatoes all over her face while Cedric's cousins took photos. Cedric's mom made a toast about being grateful for family. She looked right at me when she said it. I had to look down at my plate for a minute. Last week, Cedric got a message on LinkedIn from Darren. It was a connection request with a note. The note said Darren had been doing a lot of thinking lately. It said he understood now that he'd made serious mistakes. It said he'd been in a bad place mentally when he took those things from the warehouse. It said he'd been working with a counselor and taking steps to be better. It said he hoped Cedric could forgive him eventually and give him a chance to apologize properly in person. Cedric showed me the message. He asked what I thought. I said it sounded like the kind of thing someone writes when they've been coached on what to say. I said even if it was genuine, which I doubted, Darren sent it to Cedric's work account instead of reaching out to me or sending it to Cedric's personal email. I said that felt like another attempt to manipulate the situation. Cedric agreed. He didn't respond to the message. He didn't accept the connection request. 2 days after that, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. The text said this was Darren's new number. It said he'd sent Cedric a message on LinkedIn but hadn't heard back. It said he was hoping we could all sit down and talk things through like adults. It said he missed me and wanted to meet Nancy. It said he had a lot to explain and apologize for but needed the chance to do it face to face. I didn't respond. I blocked the number. I told Cedric about it. He said Darren was probably feeling pressure from our parents to make contact. He said our parents might be hoping Darren could get through to us since they couldn't. I said that was probably right but it didn't change anything. Nancy's first Christmas is coming up in 2 weeks. Cedric's parents bought her a giant stuffed giraffe that's taller than she is. Cedric set up a small Christmas tree in her nursery with soft ornaments she can't hurt herself with. We took her to see lights at the botanical garden last weekend. She stared at them with her mouth open the whole time. Sometimes I wonder what my parents are doing for Christmas. I wonder if they'll sit around their table and talk about how I ruined the holiday by keeping their granddaughter away. I wonder if Darren will be there or if he's moved out finally. I wonder if they'll post something on social media about the grandchild they're not allowed to see. Then I remember my dad's email in all caps calling me an ungrateful brat and saying we're dead to them. I remember my mom's emails calling me cruel and vindictive. I remember them showing up at my house and screaming at me. I remember all of it and I stopped wondering if I made the right choice. Cedric's been hinting about trying for a second baby next year. He says Nancy needs a sibling. His mom agrees. I told him we should wait until Nancy is at least 18 months old. He said that was fair. We're good where we are. Nancy has everything she needs. We have each other and Cedric's family. That's enough. I don't think my parents will reach out again. I think my dad's all caps email was probably their real final word. Darren might try again at some point but I doubt it will be with a genuine apology. He'll probably just cycle through the same talking points about how everyone makes mistakes and family should forgive. I'll block whatever number he uses and move on. People ask sometimes if I feel bad about Nancy not knowing her other grandparents. The answer is no. Nancy can't miss people she never met. She has grandparents who show up and help and love her. That's what matters. The biology doesn't matter. The title doesn't matter. The actual relationship is what matters. I haven't posted on social media about any of this. I haven't corrected the stories my parents apparently told their friends. I haven't defended myself to extended family members who probably think I'm in the wrong. I just live my life with my husband and daughter. The people who know me know the truth. Everyone else can think whatever they want. This is probably the end of the story unless something dramatic changes. I doubt it will. We'll keep living our lives. My parents will keep living theirs. Maybe someday they'll understand why I made the choices I made. Probably they won't. Either way, I'm done waiting for them to figure it out. Nancy's crawling toward me right now trying to grab my phone. That's my cue to go. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My wife completely destroyed our 2-year marriage during our second anniversary trip to Costa Rica by secretly cheating with her personal trainer while I thought we were having the most romantic vacation of our lives together. I never thought I would be writing something like this. My name is Marcus, 29M, and I have been with my wife Elena, 26F, for 6 years now. We got married 2 years ago in a beautiful ceremony that cost us nearly $40,000. Everyone said we were the perfect couple. Elena works as a marketing coordinator at a tech startup downtown and I work as an electrical engineer for a construction company. We bought our first house together 18 months ago in the suburbs with a nice backyard and 2-car garage. Last month we went on our second anniversary trip to Costa Rica. Elena had been planning this trip for months. She researched every restaurant, every activity, every hotel. She made spreadsheets with our daily schedule and printed out confirmation emails for everything. This level of planning was typical for Elena. She organized our entire wedding down to the minute and kept detailed budgets for all our expenses. I always appreciated how she handled these things because I tend to be more relaxed about planning. The problem started on our second day in Costa Rica. We were staying at an all-inclusive resort near Manuel Antonio. Elena brought her phone everywhere, even to the beach. She would check it constantly and type messages while we were supposed to be relaxing together. When I asked her about it, she said her boss needed updates on a project deadline. This seemed strange because Elena had specifically told her boss she would be completely offline during our anniversary trip. On the third day, I noticed Elena was getting up early every morning around 6. She said she wanted to use the resort gym before it got crowded. This was unusual because Elena never exercised in the morning at home. She always went to her personal training sessions after work on Tuesdays and Thursdays. When I offered to join her at the gym, she said she preferred to work out alone because I would distract her from her routine. The gym excuse continued for the next 4 days. Elena would leave our room at 6 in the morning and return around 8 for breakfast. She always showered at the gym, so she came back already clean and dressed. During breakfast, she seemed distant and kept checking her phone. When I tried to start conversations about our plans for the day, she gave short answers and kept looking at her screen. On our 7th day, I decided to surprise Elena at the gym. I woke up at 5:30 and quietly got dressed while she was still sleeping. I walked to the resort fitness center and waited outside until 6:15. Elena never showed up. I asked the front desk staff if they had seen a woman matching her description. The desk clerk said the gym had been empty all morning except for one elderly man on the treadmill. I returned to our room and found Elena getting out of the shower. When I asked where she had been, she said she had changed her routine and taken a long walk on the beach instead. She seemed nervous when she answered and avoided looking directly at me. I noticed her phone was face down on the nightstand, which was unusual because she normally kept its screen up to see notifications. That afternoon we went zip lining through the rainforest canopy. Elena seemed more relaxed and engaged during this activity. We took photos together and she even put her arm around me for some selfies. For a few hours, it felt like our normal relationship. But during lunch afterward, her phone buzzed with a text message. I could see part of the notification before she quickly grabbed the phone. The message started with the words "missing you already." I asked Elena who had texted her. She said it was her sister Sarah, 23F, sending updates about their parents. This explanation made sense because Elena's mother had been having health issues recently. But something about Elena's reaction seemed off. She held the phone close to her chest while typing her response and tilted the screen away from me. On our 8th day, Elena said she had a headache and wanted to stay in the room while I went snorkeling. This was disappointing because snorkeling had been one of the activities Elena had specifically marked as a must-do on her planning spreadsheets. I offered to stay with her, but she insisted I should go and enjoy the excursion. She said she would take a nap and feel better by the time I returned. The snorkeling trip lasted about 4 hours. When I got back to our room around 3 in the afternoon, Elena was not there. I waited for another hour before she returned carrying shopping bags from the resort gift shop. She said she had felt better and decided to buy souvenirs for our families. The bags contained t-shirts, postcards, and a bottle of Costa Rican coffee. But Elena seemed flustered when she walked into the room, and her hair looked different than it had in the morning. That evening at dinner, I tried to bring up my concerns about how distant Elena had been acting. I mentioned that this trip was supposed to be about celebrating our marriage and spending quality time together. Elena apologized and said work stress had been affecting her more than she realized. She promised to put her phone away and focus on enjoying our last few days in Costa Rica. For the next 2 days, Elena did seem more present. She participated in our planned activities and had longer conversations during meals. But I still caught her checking her phone when she thought I was not looking. On our last night, we had dinner at an expensive restaurant overlooking the ocean. Elena ordered a bottle of wine and we talked about planning our next vacation. For those few hours, everything felt normal again. The flight home was uneventful. Elena slept most of the way and I caught up on some work emails. During our layover in Miami, Elena went to the bathroom and left her phone on the table next to me. The screen lit up with a text notification from a contact named Derek. The message said, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow at our usual time." I did not open the message, but seeing it made my stomach drop. When Elena returned from the bathroom, I mentioned that her phone had received a text. She quickly checked it and said Derek was a colleague who wanted to schedule a meeting. This explanation seemed reasonable, but I remembered Elena mentioning that most of her colleagues were women. She had never talked about working closely with anyone named Derek. After we got home, Elena's behavior patterns changed. She started staying late at work more frequently and began going to her personal training sessions 3 times per week instead of twice. When I asked about the increased training schedule, she said she wanted to get in better shape for summer. She also started taking her phone into the bathroom when she showered, claiming she did not want to miss important work calls. 2 weeks after our Costa Rica trip, I decided to check our cell phone bill online. Elena and I had always shared access to our account, and we typically reviewed the bill together each month. When I logged into the account, I saw that Elena's phone usage had increased significantly over the past 3 months. She was sending and receiving hundreds of text messages to a number I did not recognize. The calls to this number often lasted 30 to 40 minutes and usually happened during her lunch breaks or after work. I wrote down the phone number and did a reverse lookup online. The number belonged to Derek Thompson, who owned a private fitness studio about 10 minutes from Elena's office. His website showed photos of him leading personal training sessions and small group fitness classes. Derek appeared to be in his mid-30s with an athletic build and several fitness certifications listed on his bio page. The website also showed that Derek offered specialized training packages for clients who wanted intensive one-on-one coaching. The packages included early morning sessions, nutritional planning, and ongoing text message support throughout the week. This information explained some of Elena's behavior changes, but it did not explain why she had lied about her morning activities in Costa Rica or why Derek was texting her about their usual time. I decided to drive by Derek's fitness studio during Elena's Thursday training session. The studio was located in a converted warehouse with large windows facing the parking lot. I could see Elena inside working with Derek on weight training exercises. They appeared to be having an animated conversation while she rested between sets. At one point, Derek placed his hand on Elena's shoulder while demonstrating a movement. The interaction looked more personal than what I would expect from a typical trainer-client relationship. When Elena came home that evening, she mentioned that Derek had introduced some new exercises to her routine. She seemed enthusiastic about the training program and talked about how much her strength and endurance had improved. She also mentioned that Derek had recommended some dietary changes and had offered to send her meal planning suggestions via text message. The next morning, I found Elena's phone charging on the kitchen counter while she was getting ready for work. I had never looked through her phone before, but the Derek situation was bothering me more each day. I picked up the phone and saw several unread text messages from Derek. The messages included "Good morning beautiful" and "Thinking about you." These messages clearly went beyond professional trainer-client communication. I put the phone back exactly where I found it and went to work as usual. Throughout the day, I kept thinking about what I had seen. The messages suggested that Elena and Derek had developed a personal relationship that extended beyond fitness training. When combined with Elena's secretive behavior during our anniversary trip, the evidence pointed to something I did not want to believe. That weekend, Elena said she needed to go to Derek's studio for a special Saturday session. She explained that Derek was offering additional training time to help her prepare for a 5K race she wanted to run in the fall. This was the first time Elena had mentioned wanting to run a race, but I did not question her explanation. She left the house at 9 in the morning and said she would be back by 11. Elena returned home at 1:30 in the afternoon. When I asked about the extended training session, she said Derek had also shown her some stretching techniques that took longer than expected. She had also stopped for lunch afterward because the workout had made her particularly hungry. Elena seemed relaxed and happy, but she avoided eye contact while explaining her delayed return. This pattern continued for the next month. Elena's training sessions became longer and more frequent. She started going to Derek's studio on weekends and occasionally during her lunch breaks. Her explanations for these additional sessions always sounded reasonable, but the frequency seemed excessive for someone who had never been particularly interested in intensive fitness training. 3 weeks ago, I decided to check Elena's phone again while she was in the shower. The text conversation with Derek had become much more extensive. They were messaging each other multiple times throughout each day. Many of the messages contained personal details about their daily lives, inside jokes, and comments about missing each other. Derek had sent photos of his meals and asked Elena to rate them. Elena had sent Derek photos of her outfits and asked for his opinions. The most concerning messages were from the time period when we were in Costa Rica. Derek had sent Elena good morning messages every day while we were supposed to be on our romantic anniversary trip. Elena had responded with messages about wishing she was back home and counting down the days until she could see him again. On the day when Elena claimed to have a headache and stayed in the room while I went snorkeling, she had actually met Derek via video call for over an hour. I also found evidence that Elena and Derek had been meeting outside of the fitness studio. They had discussed meeting at coffee shops, going for walks in different parks around the city, and having lunch together at restaurants. Some of these meetings had happened on days when Elena told me she was working late or running errands after work. The timeline showed that Elena's relationship with Derek had started about 4 months ago, just a few weeks before we booked our Costa Rica anniversary trip. What made this discovery particularly painful was realizing that Elena had been planning our romantic getaway while simultaneously developing feelings for another man. The attention and care she had put into planning our trip seemed meaningless now that I knew she had been thinking about Derek the entire time. I have not confronted Elena about what I discovered. I wanted to gather all the facts before having that conversation. I also needed time to figure out what I wanted to do with this information. Elena and I have built a life together over the past 6 years. We own a house together, share financial accounts, and have made long-term plans for our future. The idea of ending our marriage feels overwhelming, but I also cannot imagine continuing to live with someone who has been lying to me for months. Yesterday Elena mentioned that Derek had offered her a special training package that would include sessions 5 days per week. She seemed excited about this opportunity and asked if I would be supportive of her dedicating more time to fitness. The way she framed this request made it clear that she wanted to spend even more time with Derek, regardless of how it might affect our marriage. I told Elena I needed to think about whether such an intensive training schedule would be good for our relationship. She seemed disappointed by my response and said she thought I would be happy about her commitment to getting healthier. We did not discuss it further, but the conversation highlighted how differently we were viewing her relationship with Derek. I have been sleeping poorly for the past week. I keep replaying conversations with Elena and trying to figure out when she started lying to me. I also keep wondering if other people in our lives know about Derek and have been keeping Elena's secret. The thought that our friends or family members might know about this situation while I've been completely unaware makes everything feel worse. Now I need to decide what to do next. I could confront Elena directly and demand explanations for her behavior. I could try to contact Derek and ask him about the nature of his relationship with my wife. I could consult with a lawyer about protecting myself financially if our marriage ends. Or I could try to pretend I never discovered any of this information and hope that Elena's relationship with Derek eventually ends on its own. None of these options feel good, but doing nothing also feels impossible. I cannot continue pretending that everything is normal when I know Elena has been living a double life for the past several months. Our marriage was supposed to be built on trust and honesty, but Elena has been violating both of those principles while I remained completely oblivious. Update 1: 3 weeks have passed since I wrote my original post, and the situation with Elena has become much more complicated. I want to thank everyone who responded to my first post with advice and support. Reading your comments helped me realize that I needed to take action rather than continuing to pretend everything was normal. After thinking about the advice I received, I decided to gather more concrete evidence before confronting Elena about Derek. I knew that she would likely deny everything or try to minimize the relationship if I only had text messages as proof. I also wanted to understand the full extent of their involvement before making any decisions about our marriage. The first thing I did was install a GPS tracking app on Elena's phone. I know this sounds invasive, but I needed to know whether Elena was actually going to Derek's fitness studio or meeting him in other locations. I was able to install the app while Elena was sleeping, and it would send me updates about her location throughout the day. The tracking app revealed that Elena's version of her schedule did not match her actual movements. On days when she said she was working late, the GPS showed her phone at Derek's studio or at restaurants across town. On the Saturday when she claimed to have a training session followed by lunch, the GPS showed her at Derek's apartment complex for over 4 hours. She had never mentioned visiting Derek's home, and this timeline made it clear that their relationship had progressed beyond professional training. I also started paying closer attention to Elena's physical appearance and behavior when she returned from her supposed training sessions. After sessions at Derek's studio, Elena often came home with her hair styled differently than when she left. Her makeup was usually reapplied, and she smelled like cologne that was definitely not her usual perfume. On several occasions, her clothes were wrinkled in ways that did not make sense if she had only been exercising. 2 weeks ago, I decided to follow Elena to one of her evening training sessions. I left work early and drove to Derek's studio about 30 minutes before Elena's scheduled appointment. I parked across the street where I could see the entrance but would not be easily noticed. Elena arrived at the studio at her usual time, but instead of going inside, she walked around to the back of the building where Derek was waiting by a black pickup truck. Elena and Derek embraced and kissed for several minutes before getting into Derek's truck together. They drove away from the studio, and I followed them at a distance. Derek drove to a small house about 15 minutes away from his business. The house was in an older neighborhood with mature trees and modest single-family homes. Derek and Elena went inside together, and Derek's truck remained parked in the driveway. I waited outside Derek's house for 2 hours. During that time, I could see lights on in what appeared to be the living room and bedroom. The blinds were closed, so I could not see specific activities, but it was obvious that Elena and Derek were spending intimate time together. When they finally came outside, Elena's hair was messy and her clothes were disheveled. They kissed goodbye again before Elena got into her own car and drove home. Elena arrived home about 30 minutes after I did. She seemed relaxed and happy when she walked into the house. When I asked about her training session, she said Derek had worked her particularly hard and she felt great about her progress. She mentioned that they had spent extra time on stretching and recovery techniques. Elena then went straight to the shower and spent almost an hour getting cleaned up. The next morning, I found Elena's gym bag and looked through it for evidence of her actual activities. The bag contained her usual workout clothes, but they were clean and did not smell like sweat. Her water bottle was still full, and her towel was completely dry. This confirmed that Elena had not actually exercised during her supposed training session with Derek. I also started checking our credit card statements more carefully to look for unusual charges. I discovered that Elena had been using our joint credit card to pay for hotel rooms during her lunch breaks. The charges were always at the same hotel near Derek's studio, and they always occurred on days when Elena claimed to be working through lunch. The amounts were consistent with day rate room charges, and the timing suggested that Elena and Derek were meeting at this hotel regularly. When I called the hotel to inquire about these charges, the front desk staff confirmed that Elena had been booking rooms under her name approximately twice per week for the past 2 months. The staff member mentioned that Elena usually arrived with a male companion and stayed for about 2 hours each visit. This information provided concrete proof that Elena's relationship with Derek had become physical and was happening on a regular basis. Armed with all this evidence, I finally decided to confront Elena about her relationship with Derek. I chose a Saturday morning when we both had time to talk without work distractions. I showed Elena printouts of the GPS tracking data, photos I had taken of her and Derek together, and copies of the hotel charges from our credit card statements. Elena's initial reaction was shock and anger that I had been monitoring her activities. She accused me of violating her privacy and said that tracking her phone was a sign that our marriage was already broken. She tried to turn the conversation around and make me the villain for discovering her affair rather than addressing her own dishonesty. After the initial anger subsided, Elena admitted that she had been seeing Derek outside of their professional training relationship. However, she minimized the extent of their involvement and claimed that their relationship had only recently become physical. She said she had never intended for things to go as far as they did, and she insisted that her relationship with Derek did not mean she loved me any less. Elena also tried to blame me for her affair by saying that I had become complacent in our marriage and was not meeting her emotional needs. She claimed that Derek made her feel appreciated and attractive in ways that I had stopped doing. According to Elena, her relationship with Derek started as innocent friendship but evolved into something more because Derek gave her attention that was missing from our marriage. I asked Elena to explain why she had lied to me constantly for months instead of talking to me about problems in our marriage. I also asked her to explain why she had continued planning our anniversary trip to Costa Rica while simultaneously developing feelings for another man. Elena could not provide satisfactory answers to these questions and kept returning to her claim that she never intended for things to progress as far as they did. The conversation continued for several hours and became increasingly heated. Elena admitted that she had been meeting Derek at the hotel during her lunch breaks and that she had lied about her whereabouts on numerous occasions. She also admitted that Derek had been sending her inappropriate text messages and that she had been responding to them enthusiastically. However, Elena maintained that her relationship with Derek was primarily emotional and that the physical aspects were minimal. She claimed that they had only been intimate a few times and that she had never told Derek she loved him. When I showed her printed copies of text messages where she had explicitly told Derek she loved him and missed him constantly, Elena became defensive and said those messages were taken out of context. At the end of our conversation, Elena asked me what I wanted to do about our marriage. She said she was willing to end her relationship with Derek if I could forgive her mistakes and work on rebuilding our trust. She suggested that we could go to counseling together and develop better communication patterns so that similar problems would not arise in the future. I told Elena that I needed time to think about whether our marriage could be salvaged after such extensive dishonesty. I explained that the issue was not just her relationship with Derek, but also the months of lying and deception that had accompanied it. I said I needed to understand how Elena could look me in the eye every day while maintaining a secret relationship with another man. Elena moved into our guest bedroom that same day. We agreed that we would give each other space while I decided what I wanted to do about our marriage. Elena canceled her training sessions with Derek and said she would have no contact with him while we figured things out. She also offered to show me her phone messages and provide access to her email accounts to prove that she was ending the relationship. For the past week, Elena has been trying to convince me that our marriage is worth saving. She has cooked elaborate dinners, planned activities for us to do together, and written me long letters explaining how sorry she is for her mistakes. She has also been more physically affectionate than she had been in months before I discovered her affair. However, I am struggling to believe that Elena's remorse is genuine rather than just fear of losing the stability and financial security that our marriage provides. The fact that she maintained her relationship with Derek for months while lying to me every day suggests a level of calculation and deception that I find difficult to forgive. I also keep wondering what other lies Elena has told me that I have not yet discovered. Yesterday Elena suggested that we take a weekend trip together to work on reconnecting and rebuilding our relationship. She offered to plan everything and said she would leave her phone at home to prove her commitment to focusing on our marriage. While part of me appreciates the gesture, another part of me finds it ironic that Elena is now offering to take a phone-free trip after she spent our last vacation texting with Derek constantly. I have not yet decided what I want to do about our marriage. Elena's affair has fundamentally changed how I view our relationship and our future together. Even if Elena never contacts Derek again, I am not sure I can trust her to be honest with me about other aspects of her life. The thought of spending years wondering whether Elena is telling me the truth about her activities and relationships feels exhausting and unsustainable. Several friends and family members have reached out since Elena and I started having obvious problems. Most of them have encouraged me to try to work things out with Elena because of how long we have been together and how much we have invested in our shared life. However, none of them know the full extent of Elena's deception, and I am not sure their advice would be the same if they understood how calculated and extensive her affair had been. I plan to make a final decision about our marriage within the next few weeks. I have consulted with a divorce attorney to understand my options, but I have not yet filed any paperwork. I want to be completely sure about my decision before taking irreversible steps. In the meantime, Elena and I are essentially living as roommates while we figure out whether our relationship can be repaired. Update 26 weeks have passed since my last update, and my situation with Elena has taken several unexpected turns. I wanted to share what has happened because some of you have been following my story and asking for updates. After Elena moved into the guest bedroom, things between us remained tense but manageable for about 2 weeks. Elena seemed to be making genuine efforts to repair our relationship. She stopped using her phone around me, started coming home directly after work, and suggested activities we could do together on weekends. She also wrote me several long letters apologizing for her behavior and explaining how much our marriage meant to her. During this period, I was trying to decide whether Elena's remorse was sincere and whether I could eventually trust her again. The counseling sessions Elena had suggested seemed like a reasonable next step, so I agreed to attend couples therapy with her. We scheduled our first appointment with a therapist who specialized in rebuilding trust after infidelity. Our first therapy session was scheduled for a Thursday evening 3 weeks ago. Elena seemed nervous but optimistic about the appointment. She had prepared a list of topics she wanted to discuss and had researched the therapist's background to understand her approach to marriage counseling. Elena's preparation for therapy showed the same level of detail and organization she had always applied to important projects. On the morning of our therapy appointment, Elena received a phone call that she said was from her sister Sarah. Elena stepped outside to take the call, which lasted about 20 minutes. When she came back inside, Elena seemed upset and distracted. She said Sarah was having relationship problems and needed emotional support. Elena asked if we could reschedule our therapy appointment because she felt too stressed about Sarah's situation to focus on our own issues. I agreed to reschedule the appointment, but Elena's behavior for the rest of that day seemed inconsistent with someone who was worried about her sister. Elena spent most of the afternoon cleaning the house and organizing our closets. She also cooked an elaborate dinner and opened a bottle of wine. These activities suggested celebration rather than concern about family problems. That evening, I decided to call Sarah directly to ask about her relationship problems and offer support. Sarah seemed confused by my call and said she had not talked to Elena in several days. When I mentioned that Elena had received a distressing phone call from her that morning, Sarah said she had been at work all day and had not called anyone in our family. This conversation with Sarah made it clear that Elena had lied about the source and content of her morning phone call. When I confronted Elena about this discrepancy, she initially tried to claim that Sarah was confused about the timing of their conversation. However, when I pressed for details about Sarah's supposed relationship problems, Elena could not provide consistent answers. Eventually Elena admitted that the phone call had not been from Sarah. She said Derek had called her to say goodbye because he was moving to another city for a new job opportunity. According to Elena, Derek wanted to apologize for the problems he had caused in our marriage and to let her know that he would not try to contact her again. I asked Elena why she had lied about who called her instead of just telling me that Derek wanted to say goodbye. Elena said she was afraid I would think she was maintaining contact with Derek when she was actually trying to end their relationship permanently. She claimed that Derek's call was unexpected and that she had not initiated any contact with him. This explanation seemed plausible, but I was disturbed by Elena's instinct to lie rather than tell me the truth about Derek's call. The fact that Elena chose deception over honesty suggested that she had not learned from the mistakes that had nearly ended our marriage. I told Elena that rebuilding trust would be impossible if she continued lying to me about any contact with Derek. Elena apologized for lying about the phone call and promised that she would be completely honest with me going forward. She suggested that we proceed with couples therapy as planned and use Derek's departure as an opportunity to start fresh with our marriage. Elena seemed relieved that Derek was leaving town and said his absence would make it easier for her to focus on our relationship. We rescheduled our therapy appointment for the following week. During the days leading up to the appointment, Elena's behavior returned to the pattern of attention and affection she had shown immediately after I discovered her affair. She planned special dinners, suggested weekend activities, and was more physically affectionate than she had been in months. However, I also noticed that Elena was still being secretive about her phone usage. She continued taking her phone into the bathroom when she showered and kept it face down on surfaces when we were together. When I asked Elena about these habits, she said she was still adjusting to being more open about her communications and that old patterns were difficult to change. 3 days before our rescheduled therapy appointment, I discovered that Elena had been lying about Derek leaving town. I was running errands near Derek's fitness studio and decided to drive by to see if the business was still operating. Not only was the studio still open, but Derek's truck was parked outside and the lights were on inside the building. This discovery prompted me to check Elena's phone usage on our wireless account again. The records showed that Elena had been communicating with Derek's phone number regularly since the day she claimed he had called to say goodbye. The communications included both phone calls and text messages, occurring at times when Elena was supposedly at work or running errands. When I confronted Elena with this evidence, she broke down and admitted that she had never stopped communicating with Derek. She said Derek had not actually moved away and that they had been meeting occasionally since our original confrontation about their affair. Elena claimed that she had tried to end the relationship multiple times but that Derek kept convincing her to give him another chance. Elena also admitted that she had been lying about several other aspects of her recent behavior. The extra hours she claimed to be spending at work were actually being spent with Derek at his apartment or at the hotel where they had been meeting previously. The shopping trips and errands Elena said she was running were cover stories for additional meetings with Derek. Most painfully, Elena revealed that she had told Derek details about our marriage problems and our attempts at reconciliation. Derek apparently knew about our planned therapy sessions and had been encouraging Elena to go through the motions of repairing our marriage while maintaining their relationship. According to Elena, Derek believed that she would eventually leave me for him but wanted to take things slowly to avoid financial complications. This revelation made me realize that Elena's efforts to save our marriage had never been genuine. She had been performing remorse and commitment while secretly planning to continue her relationship with Derek. The letters she had written, the dinners she had cooked, and the therapy she had suggested were all part of an elaborate deception designed to buy time while she figured out how to transition from our marriage to a relationship with Derek. I asked Elena why she had bothered with this charade instead of just asking for a divorce if she wanted to be with Derek. Elena said she was afraid of the financial consequences of ending our marriage and was not sure Derek was ready for a serious commitment. She had been trying to keep both relationships active while she decided which option would provide better long-term security. Elena's admission that she had been treating our marriage as a backup plan while pursuing Derek was the final confirmation I needed about the future of our relationship. I told Elena that I wanted her to move out of our house immediately and that I would be filing for divorce. I also told her that I would not be attending any therapy sessions because there was no longer anything to repair. Elena begged me to reconsider and claimed that she had finally realized that she wanted to save our marriage. She said her continued contact with Derek had been a mistake and that she was ready to cut off all communication with him permanently. Elena offered to quit her job and move to a different city with me if that would help rebuild trust between us. However, Elena's pattern of lying had become so extensive that I could no longer believe anything she said. The fact that she had maintained her relationship with Derek while pretending to work on our marriage showed a level of manipulation that I found unforgivable. I realized that Elena would likely continue lying to me about other aspects of her life even if she did end her relationship with Derek. Elena moved out of our house last week and is currently staying with a friend while she looks for a permanent place to live. She has continued trying to contact me through text messages and emails, but I have not responded to any of her communications. I have also blocked Derek's phone number in case he tries to contact me directly. I filed for divorce yesterday and hired an attorney who specializes in cases involving infidelity. The divorce process will likely take several months, but I am confident that I made the right decision. Elena's willingness to lie repeatedly about fundamental aspects of our relationship convinced me that our marriage could never be rebuilt on a foundation of trust and honesty. Several people have asked me whether I regret not trying harder to save my marriage. While divorce was not the outcome I wanted when I first discovered Elena's affair, I believe that Elena's continued deception made it the only viable option. I cannot imagine spending years wondering whether Elena is telling me the truth about her activities, relationships, and feelings. The hardest part of this process has been accepting that the person I thought I knew for 6 years was willing to lie to me so extensively about such important matters. Elena's affair was devastating, but her willingness to continue lying while pretending to work on our marriage was even more damaging to my ability to trust her in the future. Update 3-4 months have passed since I filed for divorce from Elena, and I wanted to provide a final update on how everything concluded. Many of you have been following my story and asking for closure, so I appreciate your continued interest and support. The divorce process took longer than I initially expected due to complications involving our shared assets and disagreements about property division. Elena contested several aspects of the divorce settlement, particularly regarding our house and joint financial accounts. Her attorney argued that Elena deserved a larger share of our assets because she had contributed equally to our household expenses during our marriage. My attorney was able to demonstrate that Elena's affair constituted a violation of our marriage contract and that her deceptive behavior had caused emotional distress that justified a more favorable settlement for me. We also presented evidence of Elena's use of our joint credit card to pay for hotel rooms during her meetings with Derek, which helped establish that she had misused marital assets to support her extramarital relationship. During the legal proceedings, additional details about Elena's relationship with Derek came to light. Discovery documents revealed that Elena and Derek had been planning to start a business together using money from our joint savings account. They had researched opening a fitness studio that would compete directly with Derek's current employer. Elena had already transferred $10,000 from our savings to a separate account that Derek could access. This financial betrayal was particularly painful because Elena and I had been saving that money for a down payment on a larger house. We had discussed our plans for upgrading our living situation many times, and Elena had been enthusiastic about finding a house with more space for potential future children. Learning that Elena had been secretly planning to use our savings to start a business with Derek felt like yet another layer of deception. Elena's attorney tried to argue that the transferred money was Elena's contribution to a legitimate business investment and that I had no right to control how Elena spent her portion of our marital assets. However, my attorney was able to show that Elena had transferred the money without my knowledge and had lied to me about her intentions for our shared savings. The judge ultimately ruled in my favor on most contested issues. I was awarded primary ownership of our house, and Elena was required to return the money she had transferred to Derek's account. Elena was also required to pay my legal fees because her attorney had filed several frivolous motions that prolonged the divorce process unnecessarily. During one of our final court appearances, I learned that Elena's relationship with Derek had ended shortly after she moved out of our house. According to Elena's testimony, Derek had decided that Elena was too much drama and had started dating someone else. Elena claimed that Derek had used her for money and emotional support but had never been serious about building a long-term relationship with her. This information confirmed my suspicion that Derek had been manipulating Elena throughout their affair. Elena's willingness to risk her marriage for someone who ultimately discarded her suggested that her judgment about relationships was deeply flawed. I felt vindicated in my decision to divorce Elena rather than trying to rebuild our marriage. Elena also revealed during her testimony that she had been lying to Derek about aspects of our marriage. She had told Derek that our relationship was already failing before their affair began and that I was emotionally distant and unsupportive. Elena had apparently convinced Derek that she was planning to leave me regardless of their relationship, which made Derek feel less guilty about pursuing a married woman. The fact that Elena had been lying to both Derek and me about fundamental aspects of our relationship showed a pattern of manipulation that extended beyond our marriage. Elena's willingness to deceive multiple people simultaneously suggested that dishonesty was her default approach to managing complicated situations. After the divorce was finalized, I learned additional information about Elena's behavior from mutual friends who had been aware of problems in our marriage. Several people told me that Elena had been complaining about our relationship for months before I discovered her affair. She had apparently been telling friends that I was controlling and emotionally unavailable, which contradicted the supportive and affectionate behavior she was showing me at home. These revelations helped me understand that Elena had been building a narrative to justify her affair long before it began. By portraying me negatively to friends and to Derek, Elena had created a story that made her betrayal seem more acceptable. This calculated approach to managing her image while deceiving me confirmed that ending our marriage had been the right decision. The financial settlement from our divorce allowed me to keep our house and most of our shared assets. I used some of the money to renovate the house and make it feel like my own space rather than a reminder of my failed marriage. I also took a vacation to Europe, something Elena and I had talked about doing together but never planned. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I heard through mutual friends that Elena had moved to a different state. Apparently, she had taken a job with a marketing company in Arizona and was starting over in a new city. I also heard that Derek had sold his fitness studio and moved away from our area, though I do not know if Elena's relocation was related to Derek's departure. The end of my marriage to Elena taught me important lessons about recognizing deceptive behavior and trusting my instincts when something feels wrong. During our relationship, I had ignored several warning signs because I wanted to believe that Elena was trustworthy. In future relationships, I will pay closer attention to inconsistencies between words and actions. I have not attempted to date anyone seriously since my divorce from Elena. The experience of being deceived so extensively by someone I trusted completely has made me more cautious about opening up to new people. However, I am not bitter about the possibility of finding love again. I believe that most people are more honest than Elena proved to be. My family and friends have been supportive throughout the divorce process and recovery period. Many of them admitted that they had suspected problems in my marriage with Elena but had not wanted to interfere in our relationship. Their support has helped me rebuild my confidence and move forward with my life. I have also focused on advancing my career and pursuing hobbies that I had neglected during my marriage. I started taking photography classes and have been traveling to different parts of the country to practice landscape photography. These activities have helped me rediscover interests that I had set aside while focusing on building a life with Elena. Looking back on my marriage to Elena, I recognize that there were warning signs I should have noticed earlier. Elena's need to control information and her tendency to provide overly detailed explanations for simple situations were red flags that I dismissed at the time. In future relationships, I will be more alert to these types of behaviors. I do not regret the years I spent with Elena because they taught me valuable lessons about relationships and about myself. However, I am grateful that I discovered her affair when I did rather than after we had children together or had made even larger financial commitments. The pain of divorce was significant, but it was better than spending more years in a relationship built on deception. The legal process of divorce also taught me about protecting myself financially in relationships. I now understand the importance of maintaining some separate assets and keeping detailed records of major financial decisions. These lessons will help me approach future relationships with better boundaries and more realistic expectations. Today, almost 2 years after discovering Elena's affair, I can say that my life has improved significantly since our divorce. I have more peace of mind, better friendships, and a clearer sense of what I want in a long-term partner. While the experience of being betrayed was painful, it ultimately led me to a better understanding of myself and what I need in a healthy relationship. I want to thank everyone who followed my story and provided support during the most difficult period of my life. Your comments and advice helped me make decisions that I am confident were right for my situation. For anyone dealing with similar betrayals, I encourage you to trust your instincts and prioritize your own well-being over trying to save a relationship with someone who has shown they cannot be trusted.